The initial buzz from my phone hardly registered in my slumber, only a small vibration against the wooden nightstand. The second one piqued my interest more. But the third was brief, crisp, and persistent. I was dragged into full wakefulness. I sighed and reached for it instinctively, but my fingers brushed against something cool and silky. Lisa's phone. This was bizarre. Lisa never left her phone unattended, even when she went to the restroom, a habit I previously found endearing, proof of her addiction to social media or whatever gossip she was into. But now, my own phone is still buzzing. An uncomfortable feeling formed in my stomach. I unlocked the screen. 3 messages came from an unknown number. Check her phone. She is lying to you. She is not alone right now. The discomfort shifted to something deeper. I turned my head and reached across to Lisa's side of the bed. Empty. The sheets remained mildly warm. A shiver went down my spine. The house was silent and not peaceful. Silence. The sort that makes you feel protected, but only in a charged, waiting silence. My gaze flew to the closed bedroom door, the hall beyond it, the staircase. And suddenly there was a faint sound, not the typical creaks of the home settling, nor the hum of the fridge downstairs. Somewhat softer, something recognizable. A quiet voice, a whisper, and a giggle. Lisa giggles. My heart smashed against my ribs. Every muscle in my body tightened, as if an animal sensed a predator nearby. I was awake now, completely and terrifyingly awake. I crept out of bed as quietly as possible. I still have the phone in my hand. Every step felt deliberate and measured. I wasn't sure what I was doing or what I expected to find, but I kept going halfway down the steps. I halted. The living room light was turned off, but a faint glow from a phone screen illuminated 2 figures. Lisa and a man sit on the couch, too close. My vision tunneled. Sound is twisted. My mind struggled to comprehend what I was seeing, but reality refused to make sense. Lisa leans into him, her face inches from his, their hands touching at a private time in my home. The rage was instant, a firestorm in my veins. My breath was quick and fast, but I pushed myself to remain silent. If they could hear me today, if they gazed above. No, not yet. I tightened my grasp on the railing and was about to move when the front door creaked open. A tiny gasp and a quick gulp of breath. Our girl stood there motionless. Her startled eyes shifted between me, her mother, and the stranger on our sofa. She didn't entirely comprehend, but she was certain something was wrong. Lisa jerked up. The man whipped his head around in a short second. Everything shattered. Lisa jumped up from the couch so quickly that she nearly fell over the coffee table. I saw now that the man next her, David, had frozen like a deer caught in headlights. But I didn't look at them. I was looking at my daughter. Emily stood at the doorway. Her backpack is still hanging over one shoulder. She was not meant to be home yet. Her overnight at her friend's house was supposed to go till the morning, but something had woken her up early. Maybe you forgot your jammies or had a nasty dream. Instead of the comforts of home, she stepped into this. Her small face wrinkled with confusion. Then terror sets in. Daddy. Lisa eventually turned and saw Emily for the first time. I saw it the minute she realized how horrible things were. Her lips parted, but no words emerged. David. He moved first, like a coward. He jumped up from the couch, stuffing his phone into his pocket and running toward the door. He murmured something beneath his breath. An apology? An excuse? I didn't care. My attention was on Lisa. I stepped forward. Explain. My voice was quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that precedes an explosion. Lisa's mouth opened and closed as her mind searched for a lie. An excuse? Something to make this less obvious than it was. But she realized there was no going back from this. Not with Emily here, it is not. She started, but I shut her off. Don't. My hands tightened into fists by my sides. Don't. Emily took a step back and looked between us. Her small hands trembled. And that broke me. My daughter, my baby. She was not supposed to witness this. She was not intended to be involved in this. Lisa's gaze darted to her. Perhaps she considered some sad motherly act, some attempt to minimize it, but it was too late. Emily had seen everything. Lisa turned back to face me. Panic flashed over her gaze. Then, in a very expected move, Lisa went on the attack. "You are overreacting," she snapped, crossing her arms as if she'd been mistreated. It was not as it seemed. I genuinely made a short, bitter sound. "Oh, seriously? So what was it, Lisa?" "A Bible study. A business meeting." She scowled. "Lower your voice. Emily does not need to see you behave like this, as if I were the problem." Emily let out a small, strangled sob, and I stared at her again, really gazed at her, and how her little hands grabbed the strap of her bag. Her lips shook, and her eyes, like her mother's, filled with tears. Lisa had already taken so much from me. But this, she was taking her. I exhaled sharply, trying myself to control my voice. "Emily? Baby." I said this while crouching down. "Go upstairs." "Okay. I will come chat to you in a minute." She paused, staring at her mother. Lisa, forced to smile as if she could smooth this over, as if she weren't in the midst of the most terrible betrayal of our lives. "Go on, dear," she said. "Daddy is just upset." I bit back, wrath building in my throat. Emily nodded nervously, then turned and dashed up the stairs the moment her door closed. I turned back to Lisa. "Now," I said in a deadly calm voice, "tell me the truth, or I vow to God that you will regret every second of this." Lisa did not blink. I did not hesitate. Instead, she smirked, and then she spoke the words that sealed her doom. "Well, since you're so curious," she drawled. "I was genuinely considering asking for an open marriage." I stared at her. Waiting for the punchline, the uneasy laugh, and the backpedal. Anything that could make this into a dark, twisted joke. But Lisa simply stood there, arms crossed, the chin slanted up, looking at me as if I were the one who had lost my mind and was open to marriage. I repeated the alien words in my mouth. She rolled her eyes. "Don't be so astonished." I moved closer, lowering my voice to a deadly level. "You were sneaking around with another man in our home when our daughter walked in. And now, instead of apologizing, you're offering me an open marriage." Lisa sighed as if I had exhausted her. "Jesus, calm down. You're making this considerably bigger than it should be." I felt a snap inside me. "Do you believe this isn't big?" My voice shook now. "You think Emily seeing you with a guy isn't a huge deal? Do you believe we are breaching our vows? Lying to my face and insulting our family? None of that is significant." Lisa threw up her hands. "God, you are so theatrical. I was planning to talk to you about it someday, but you are so tense. I knew you would react this way." My heartbeat raced in my ears. The room spun, twisted, and warped into something otherworldly. My wife was standing in front of me, caught red-handed, and acting as if I were the unreasonable one. "How long?" I was compelled to leave. "How long have you seen him?" Lisa paused for just a second, but that was sufficient. I laughed. A hollow, fractured object. "So is it a yes? How long have you been messing around?" Lisa. She sighed, as if this were a trivial nuisance. "It'll be a couple months. Every late night is a girl's night. Every unexplainable errand. Every time she left her phone facing down. Everything clicked. Wow." I give out a breathless giggle and shake my head. "You're unbelievable." Lisa shrugged, as if this were nothing. "It's not such a huge thing," she said. "It is simply a matter of diversity. That is all. I love you, but I don't want to spend the rest of my life in the same dull routine. I thought that if we opened things up, it could assist us." She said it as though she was doing me a favor. I ran a hand over my hair, attempting to keep myself together. "And let me guess." I spoke angrily. "Have you already talked to David about this?" "Lisa?" Silence revealed everything I needed to know. Of course, I mumbled. "So you had your fun, made your decision, and now you expect me to agree with it?" She smirked. That same smirk, that slight gleam in her eye, as if she had already won. "You should think about it," she advised. "It could be beneficial for us." I breathed through my nose, maintaining my composure. I wanted to shout, throw, and shatter anything. But then a concept developed into a horrific, fantastic idea. Lisa preferred an open marriage. Fine, let us have an open marriage. And I knew just where to begin. Lisa sat back with her arms folded, waiting for me to blow up the storm. It's time to break down. She believed she had me backed into a corner. I thought I'd be weak. I thought I would fight for her, beg and plead. But she didn't know me as well as she assumed. I took a deep breath. I looked her full in the eyes and smiled. "You know what?" I said slowly and deliberately. "You're correct." Lisa's head tilted. She didn't anticipate that. "Wait, what?" I nodded, allowing the words to settle. "You're totally correct. We should open the marriage." She had a moment of hesitation on her face, but she hid it rapidly. "I mean, absolutely," she responded, attempting to sound smug. "I knew you would come around." "Oh, Lisa." She felt she had won. She had no idea what was coming. The next morning, I implemented my plan. I already knew where to begin. If Lisa decided to make our marriage a mockery, I'd make sure the punchline hit her hardest. I took up my phone and searched through my contacts to find the name. I was seeking for Hannah, David's wife. I'd only met her a few times at corporate events. She was calm, pleasant, and the last person you'd think to be involved in anything like this. And yet, here we were. I pressed call, and she answered on the second ring. "Hello?" "Hey, Hannah," I said, keeping my voice level. "It's Jake, Lisa's hubby." A pause, then caution. "Oh, hi." I could sense the mistrust in her tone. She may not have known everything or all of the details, but deep inside, she sensed something was wrong. I got right to the point. "I need to talk with you about David and Lisa." There was no more sound. Then, a weak breath. What did they do? 10 minutes later, we were seated across from each other in a quiet cafe. Two strangers connected by the same betrayal. I laid everything out. Lisa's late nights and texts. The way she smirked when she admitted it. And Hannah. She sat and listened, her hands squeezed so hard on her coffee cup that I worried it would break when I was finished. She exhaled softly, her eyes hazy. "I knew something was wrong," she whispered. "He's been very different. Distant. I did not want to believe it." I nodded. "Yeah, same." She gazed up at me, then changed her expression. Something keen and calculating. "What are you planning to do?" she asked. I leaned back in my chair and carefully considered my next words. "Lisa believes she is in control," I said. "She believes she has the authority to make the rules." But she made an error. Hannah tilted her head. "Which error?" I smiled. "She underestimated me." Hannah twisted her lips into a smirk-like expression. "Then let us make them regret it." Lisa returned home late that night, utterly ignorant that the ground beneath her had already crumbled. She put her purse onto the kitchen counter, as if nothing had happened. She stretched like she'd had a long day, then gave me a knowing glance. "You've been thinking about it, right?" She purred as she moved closer. "About us? About how beneficial this could be for us." I resisted the impulse to laugh in her face. Instead, I smiled. "Yeah," I spoke smoothly. "I have been thinking about it a lot." Lisa grinned as though she had won. She seemed to have cracked me open and drew me to her. She had no idea. I let her speak that night. Allow her to spin her silly arguments about freedom and exhilaration. I nodded along, appearing to listen and agree. I performed my part flawlessly, and the next night, I invited Hannah over. Lisa was in the living room when the doorbell rang, scrolling through her phone, perhaps texting David. She barely looked up as I opened the door. Then she noticed who was standing there. Hannah stepped inside, poised, her countenance unreadable. I needed to give it to her. She performed her role flawlessly. She appeared unconcerned, as if she weren't standing in front of the woman who had slept with her husband. Lisa blinked, confusion flashing across her features. "What is she doing here?" I closed the door behind Hannah and grinned. "You mentioned that you desired an open marriage," I remarked casually, so I figured, why not start with David's wife? Lisa became rigid. Hannah almost suppressed a smirk. Lisa's mouth opened and closed, and her brain struggled to keep pace. Wait, you what? I leaned against the wall and folded my arms. What? You can sleep with David, but I cannot spend time with his wife. Lisa's face became an unpleasant shade of red. That's not right. That is not the same thing. Hannah eventually spoke, and her voice was as silky as silk. Why not? She inquired, tilting her head. I mean, we're also open now. Lisa's eyes narrowed. Hannah's expression did not change. I do now. Silence. Unbearable. Lisa stared at me, then Hannah, and back at me. Her nostrils flared. She tightened her jaw and then laughed. It wasn't an ordinary laugh. It was harsh and bitter. Do you think this upsets me? She scoffed and crossed her arms. Go ahead. Be my guest. If you believe you can handle an open marriage, let's see how you like it. She was daring me. Is this a test for me? She had no idea I'd already won. Because of Lisa. Lisa was going to lose everything. Lisa believed she was calling my bluff. I thought I'd back down, that I wasn't strong enough to go through. She had spent years believing she was the most intelligent person in the room, the one who controlled everything. But this time, she had no idea what to expect. Hannah and I sat on the couch, wonderfully comfy, as Lisa paced the living room. Her arms were crossed, her face contorted with frustration. She tried to act disinterested, as if this was a harmless game, but her grasp on her phone was tight, probably waiting for David's response, probably wondering if he was aware of what he had done. I made certain of it. So, Lisa finally stopped in front of us. What is the plan here, Jake? You and Hannah will play home while I do my own thing? Is that what it is? I shrugged. You mentioned that you desired an open marriage. I'm just making sure it's fair, Lisa scoffed. You don't really want this? Hannah smoothly leaned into me, laying her hand on my knee. And how do you know what he wants? Lisa's jaw twitched. She did not like that. Not a bit. Good. I bent forward and rested my elbows on my knees. Lisa, here's the difference between us, I replied calmly. You desired an open marriage because you believed you could have it both ways. You desired all of the advantages of a devoted husband at home while sneaking around with David like a hot adolescent. Lisa rolled her eyes. Oh, please spare me the lecture. I ignored her. But I am truly embracing the new lifestyle you proposed. Lisa's eyes darkened. Jake? Hannah inclined her head, faking interest. Lisa, you don't appear cheerful. I assumed this was what you wanted. Lisa inhaled sharply. Her nostrils flared. You are so pathetic. She spit at me. Do you think dragging her into this will make me jealous? That I will crawl back and beg you to forget everything? You are a joke. I smiled. That's amusing, because you're the only one losing here. Lisa frowned, a small flicker of doubt in her gaze. That was when she realized she'd overplayed her hand. I took out my phone and tapped the screen several times. Then I flipped it around for her to see Lisa's face, dropped her own text messages, screenshots. I had forwarded to myself her late-night talks with David, her insults, lies, betrayal, and, worst of all, the message I had sent to David before he could get to her. Me. Hello, David. Just a heads up. Lisa told me everything. Good luck explaining this to Hannah. Lisa lunged for my phone, but I grabbed it back and stood up before she could take it. You are a piece of... I interrupted, pocketing my phone. Lisa, this is what honesty looks like. You should try it sometime. Lisa turned to Hannah, frantic. Do you believe it? Are you truly going to trust him? Hannah, unmoved, stood beside me. I don't have to trust him, she explained. I trust the evidence. Lisa was unraveling. I could see it. The horror, the knowledge, the absolute terror that everything was slipping through her grasp. She wanted an open marriage today. She was about to live an open life. Because I wasn't simply walking away. I was taking everything with me. Lisa stood paralyzed, her mind searching for a way out. For the first time in her life, she did not have control. She was not the smartest person in the room. She was not winning. I let the silence stretch. Let her feel it. Allow her to deeply grasp that she had already lost. Then she did what every manipulator does. When the walls closed in, she attempted to reverse the script. "You're just so determined to hurt me," she continued, her voice quivering with feigned anger. "Isn't that what this is actually about? You do not love Hannah. You do not desire an open marriage. You're just seeking vengeance." I raised an eyebrow, and Lisa's lips opened, but no words came out. She didn't expect me to own it. "You're correct." I stepped closer. "Hannah is not my favorite person. I barely know her." "But that didn't stop you from seeing David, did it?" Her face twitched. I wasn't going to let her warp the story. "And vengeance." I laughed. "You bet your ass this is retaliation since you didn't simply cheat Lisa. You have embarrassed me. Worst of all, you led our daughter to walk in on it as if nothing happened." Lisa's eyes fluttered briefly at the mention of Emily. Good. She should feel sick. She crossed her arms, attempting to recuperate. "So, what? Do you want a divorce now? Is this it?" I let out a deep breath and shook my head. Lisa! 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 I gave a toot. "You still don't understand it, do you?" I turned to Hannah. "Has David responded yet?" Hannah, calm as always, glanced at her phone. Her lips formed a faint, contented smile. "Oh," he said, "all right." Lisa's shoulders clenched. I motioned for Hannah to read it out loud. Hannah cleared her throat and spoke in perfect mimicry of David's voice. "David, Lisa, what the hell were you doing? Hannah is aware that she will be taking the children to her mother's house. She stated that she wanted a divorce. Thank you for ruining my life." Lisa flinched. I had to control myself from smiling. Hannah turned to face Lisa. Expression is unreadable. "It looks like you'll lose both men tonight." Lisa's face was filled with genuine terror for the first time. She wasn't only losing control over me, she had also lost David. This wasn't simply a horrible night. It was a disaster for her. I leaned in. I'm lowering my voice. "You requested an open marriage, Lisa. Congratulations. Now you're willing to deal with the consequences." Lisa's hands tightened into fists. "Do you think this is funny?" I tilted my head. "No, Lisa. I believe it is justice." Her breathing was raspy now. "You." The front door burst open. We all turned to see David standing there, his expression thunderous. This night didn't end. Definitely not. David came into the home like a man on edge, his face twisted in fury. His clothing was crumpled, and his hair looked like he'd been through hell. Good. Lisa swung around, her face lighting up for a few seconds as she noticed how he was looking at her. Not in love. Not with desire. With sheer, unadulterated hatred. "You idiot!" David spat, his voice low and shaky. "Do you have any idea what you did?" Lisa flinched. "David and I." She took the children. "Lisa," he snapped. "Hannah snatched everything. She called my employer. My boss. Lisa." She told him everything. "Do you understand what that means?" Lisa's lips opened and closed, but no words emerged. I glanced at Hannah, who gave me the smallest nod. It was her doing. She did not simply abandon David. On her way out, she completely destroyed his universe. Beautiful. David exhaled sharply as he ran his hand over his hair. Jesus Christ, I've lost my wife. I lost my family. And for what? A lady who cannot even keep her life together. Lisa's eyes widened. "Wait, who are you really?" David turned to me, his stare keen. "You know she was seeing someone else, right?" The air in the room altered. Lisa froze. And with that, the night took another abrupt, violent turn. I blinked. My intellect is catching up. "Come again?" David laughed bitterly and shook his head. "Oh, you did not know? Well, that is an impressive sum. All this time, I assumed she was simply screwing me behind your back." He scoffed. "It turns out she was playing both of us." Hannah exhaled a sharp, amused breath. "Oh, well." I turned to Lisa. Slow, deliberate. "Is that true, Lisa?" Lisa's breathing became shallow. I'm not sure what he is talking about." David gave a bark of laughter. "Bullshit. Asterisk T. Do not even try it." He took out his phone, tapped it a few times, and then turned the screen to me. Imagine Lisa seated in a dimly lit restaurant with another man. Not David, not me. Someone else, totally. My stomach sank. My hands are clutching at my sides. Who the hell is that? David's voice was icy. That is her boss. Hannah whistled. Wow. Aren't we ambitious, Lisa? Lisa's hands trembled. She was unraveling now, completely exposed. There are no more lies to hide behind. Jake, please listen. Shut up. Lisa's mouth jerked shut. I made a hesitant step forward. My voice remained calm. So let's get this straight. You weren't simply screwing David. You were also screwing your boss. Lisa gulped hard. It was not. David cut her off. And you? He pointed a finger at me. We're sitting here feeling awful for her, thinking it was all about me. Lisa's face contorted with despair. Jake, baby, don't, I snapped. Lisa, you don't get to baby me. Not anymore. Lisa looked between me and David, realizing she was totally screwed. She had no control, no power. There's no way out. I was about to make sure she lost everything. Lisa's entire body was trembling now. Her gaze darted between me and David, like a caged animal. But there was nowhere else to run. There are no more lies to hide behind. She backed herself into a corner, and now what? Now I was about to bury her. I turned to David, my voice dead calm. So, to be clear, you and Lisa have been sneaking around for some months. David breathed sharply and nodded. Yeah, she was not only screwing you, but also her boss. David gave a harsh laugh. Lisa appears to have reached her breaking point. You are both being silly, she screamed, her voice cracking. It wasn't even very serious. It was not. I shut her off. How long? Lisa hesitated. I made a slow and ominous step forward. How long? Lisa? Her mouth opened, but no words emerged. David's jaw constricted. Tell him, Lisa. She let out a nervous breath. 1 year. Everything inside me vanished. It's still a year. Not in weeks. Not in months. 1 entire year. I felt the wrath settle deep into my bones. Not the hot and blazing sort. No, this was something colder, sharper. Something made me dangerous. Hannah gave a short, amused breath beside me. Wow, did you really think you could get away with all of this? Lisa's breathing became ragged. I never intended it to. To whom? Lisa. I cut in, getting even closer to come out and blow up in your face. To finally have some real effects. Lisa clenched her jaw. I was about to tell you. I laughed, a bitter and empty tone. Oh, were you in? Lisa's gaze moved to David, begging. Tell them, David, it was not just me. Did you want this too? David scoffed. Oh, do you want to drag me down with you? He shakes his head. I've already lost everything tonight. My wife, my children, and my career. But you, do you still believe you can talk your way out of this? Lisa's terror grew. I didn't mean for it to happen this way. I assumed you would understand. I felt my lips curl. What do you understand, Lisa? That you did not simply betray me. You have degraded our home. That you weren't just a liar, but a complete narcissist. That you abandoned our marriage for cheap thrills. Lisa's face contorted with frustration. I deserved better than what you gave me. Silence. Deadly silence. Hannah let out a faint whistle. Wow. There it is. Lisa covered her mouth, realizing she had just whispered the silent part aloud. I nodded carefully, allowing the words to sink in. Well, Lisa, I said with a firm voice, I hope those extra men were worth it, because you've lost everything. Lisa's face became pallid. What exactly are you talking about? I took out my phone and immediately sent a message to my lawyer. One simple text file. The papers. Lisa's breath tightened. Jake, no, wait, please. I ignored her. Hannah, I said, turning to face her. Shall we? Hannah smiled. Gladly. David scoffed. I'm out of here. You two like watching her crumble. Lisa rushed at my arm, pressing her nails into my skin. Jake, please. This is something we can fix. I pulled my arm free. Lisa, there's nothing left to fix. And with that, I turned and walked out the door, leaving her begging in the rubble of her own calamity. Lisa's voice cracked as she called for me. Desperate, panicked. Jake, please do not do this. I did not turn around. I did not slow down. I walked directly to the car, Hannah stood beside me as Lisa stood in the entryway of our home, my home, watching her entire world crumble around her. David had already pulled out of the driveway, his tires roaring on the tarmac, probably going to drown himself with whiskey and regret. He'd lost his wife, his family, and his job. Lisa had made sure of it. And suddenly she was alone. Hannah paused beside my car, breathing sharply. "Well," she replied, shaking her head. That was satisfactory. I gave out a breathless laugh. My heart is still thumping. "Do you believe she will ever recover from that?" Hannah smirked. "Not a chance." I took one last look at the house. Lisa remained standing there, immobilized, her arms wrapped around herself as if they could protect her from the repercussions of her own actions. For a second, just a second, I reflected on the happy times, the 11 years we'd spent together, the nights we laughed till we couldn't breathe, the mornings when she drew me back into bed, murmuring that she never wanted to let go. But that woman did not exist anymore. Perhaps she never had. I opened the automobile door and sat in the driver's seat. Lisa took a hesitant step forward. "Jake." I rolled down the window to look at her, really stared at her. Then I said the final words I'd ever say to my wife. "You wanted an open marriage." I smiled. "You now have nothing." And with that, I drove away. Lisa did not follow. She did not shout. She just stood there, alone, while the weight of her own demise fell about her. And for the first time in a long time, I felt liberated. Here's the next story. The moment I realized something was wrong wasn't because of her phone habits or her newfound infatuation with late nights out. It was because of the way she looked at me, like if I were an impediment, something she had to put up with. That type of shift in someone's gaze. Once you notice something, you can't unsee it. It sticks to you like a stain. The first big crack in the facade occurred on Thursday night. Rachel was in the shower, and for the first time in months, her phone was on the kitchen counter rather than in her hand. It was not locked. This was the first red flag. Rachel would always lock her phone. I should not have looked. I knew I wasn't the type of person to go through his wife's texts, but there was something about the way she had been acting and the way she had kissed me earlier that evening, as if it were an afterthought, made my stomach churn. So I took it up. I opened it. The texts were not under a man's name. They never are. They were buried below Samantha Work. The conversation was stuck to the top, like a loaded rifle. "Last night was crazy. I can't quit thinking about it. God, I am neither. You're addicted. When will I see you again? I need you." I hadn't realized I was holding my breath until I exhaled so hard that my vision clouded. There were photographs of more than simply her. About him. A man I didn't recognize stood shirtless in a poorly lit hotel room mirror, a screenshot of a travel confirmation, as well as a communication in which she stated that she will be attending a corporate retreat the next weekend. I carefully placed the phone down, as if I were handling a grenade. My hands remained still, but something inside was cracking. I heard the water turn off. I heard her humming to herself. I arrived to the threshold of our bedroom, just as she emerged from the bathroom. A towel wrapped around her as if nothing had changed. She spotted me standing there, saw my face, and in that split second, I saw her expression shift. Surprise. Then comes calculation, followed by sluggish practices. "What?" she murmured, twisting her head as if I were the one acting strangely. I didn't respond. I merely stood aside, pointing to the phone on the kitchen counter. I witnessed the exact moment when she realized what had happened. She did not lunge for it. She did not panic. She sighed, as if I had inconvenienced her. Then she laughed. Laughed. "Oh, come on, Jason," she remarked, rolling her eyes. "Are we actually doing this? I'm not sure what I expected her to do." Cry, beg, stumble over excuses. Maybe I wanted her to stiffen with shame, realizing she had destroyed something true. But what she offered me was worse. Rachel moved past me, her bare feet on the floor, grabbed her phone, and locked it with a casual swipe. She then turned to face me. One eyebrow arched, as if I were the one. "You went through my phone," she continued, her voice flat and dissatisfied. I glanced at her, my heart pounding. She groaned and rolled her eyes. That is what you are going with. Jason, come on. If you had simply asked, I would have informed you. I let out a bitter, humorless laugh. Told me what? That you're screwing some random guy while I'm sitting at home like an idiot. She did not even flinch. She just tilted her head and gave me this expression like I was a child having a tantrum. You should calm down, calm down, calm down. I'd never felt the impulse to punch a wall in our whole relationship until that moment. I clenched my jaw so tightly at 8. Who is he? She smirked. Do you truly want to know? My gut twisted, and every instinct in me was screaming. Yes, but something about how she stated it. Her lips curled as if she was about to savor the taste of whatever she was about to say next, making me pause. He's a genuine dude, Jason. The remarks were like a stomach punch, a slow, methodical strike. She did not simply toss things out there. She intended them to hurt. And it worked. I felt something inside me snap an invisible thread that had kept me connected to reason. My vision tunneled. My hands curled into fists, but I pushed myself to remain still. I wouldn't give her the reaction she expected. She watched me for a long time, waiting for me to burst. When I didn't respond, she took a slow, exaggerated breath and went past me as if it were any other night. As if we had just finished bickering over what to watch on television. You should definitely sleep on the couch tonight, she muttered, before disappearing into the bedroom. You are embarrassing yourself. I stood there, heart pounding and hands trembling, staring at the closed door as if it were the entrance to some new awful reality. She didn't care. She didn't care. And now I had to decide what the hell to do about it. I did not sleep that night. I sat on the couch, staring at the black TV screen, replaying the previous talk in my mind like a broken record. Every remark, sneer, and calculated dagger she had aimed at me. A real man. The sentence lingered in my brain, corrupting every recollection I had of her. I spent 8 years of my life being treated as if I were a temporary replacement until she found someone better. I considered barging into the bedroom and yelling at her till she had no choice but to feel anything. Guilt, shame, regret, anything. But I knew Rachel. That was not how things were supposed to proceed. She'd twist and manipulate it somehow, make me the villain in the story. So I waited, and then, at 4:32 a.m., she delivered just what I needed. Her phone flashed up. I didn't touch it this time. I'd learned my lesson, but the screen was brilliant in the dark room, and my eyes caught the preview before it faded. Hello, gorgeous. Last night was amazing. I wish I could taste you again. I became ice cold. I knew I shouldn't. I knew, but my hands moved by themselves. I took her phone, marched directly into the bedroom, and turned on the light. Rachel groaned and buried her face in the pillow. Jason, what the hell? I didn't say anything. I merely held out the phone and showed her the message. She blinked at it, unaffected. Then, in the most nonchalant voice I'd ever heard, she said, That seems a little desperate of him, doesn't it? This is not a denial. This is not an apology. There was no sense of humiliation. Something inside of me broke. I grabbed the nearest thing, her nightstand lamp, and threw it against the wall. It shattered into 1,000 pieces. The bulb exploded with a tremendous pop. She laughed. Not startled. Not afraid. Left. Oh my God, you're so dramatic, she exclaimed, flinging off the blanket and sitting up. What would you like me to say, Jason? That I am sorry. I regret it. Do you think I'll sit here and cry, begging you to forgive me? Please, she snorted. That's not how it works. I was breathing like if I had just finished a marathon. My hands tightened so tightly that my claws dug into my palms. What the hell is wrong with you? She groaned, rising up and stretching, as if this were a slight annoyance. I was going to tell you eventually, but you found out before, so congratulations, I suppose. I was going to get sick. Tell me, what? That I am leaving you. The words knocked the breath out of me. She crossed her arms and tilted her head. I've been checking out of this marriage for years, Jason. You simply never noticed. To be honest, I never expected you to grow a spine and call me out on it. So this turned out perfectly. I was shaking. I wanted to shout at her, pull the entire place apart, and do something drastic because I felt like I was drowning in a maelstrom of wrath, incredulity, and gut-wrenching betrayal. But then she grinned, that smug, triumphant look, and I realized she wanted me to break. She wanted me to crack, lose control, so she could point to me and say, "See? Look at how insane he is." So I choked it all down and forced myself to breathe steadily. I nodded once and took a step back toward the door. "You want out?" My voice was unusually calm. "Fine. But I promise you, Rachel, you'll come to regret this." She rolled her eyes and flopped back onto the bed. I doubt it. I didn't utter another word. I just walked out. And in that instant, I realized it wasn't over. I didn't return to the couch. I didn't even stay inside the house. I grabbed my keys, stepped right out the front door, and drove. I had no destination and no plan, just sheer scorching adrenaline coursing through my veins, pushing me forth like a guy possessed. Rachel believed she had won, that arrogant little smirk, this disdainful attitude. She thought she had it all figured out, that I was simply going to roll over and let her walk away, allow her to laugh in my face as she packs her things and dashes off to whatever mail is waiting in the wings. She believed I was weak. That's what cut the most deeply. Not only did they cheat and lie, but they also showed a complete lack of respect. She didn't recognize me as a human anymore, just an impediment, a nuisance. I clutched the steering wheel so fiercely that my knuckles cracked. I needed answers, so I called. It rang twice before a sleepy voice responded. "Jason? Dude, it's like 5 a.m. What's happening?" Matt, my best friend from college. The one person who had always had my back, regardless of what. "I need you to tell the truth," I said with a quiet voice. "Dangerous." Did you recognize the beat of silence? Too long, too hesitant. My stomach sank. "Jason, no, no, no." "Did you know?" I whispered. "Listen, man, this was not my place." I almost tossed my phone out the window. "How long?" Matt breathed deeply. "Several months." I slammed on the brakes, the wheels shrieking on the road. My vision turned crimson. Several months. My best buddy and brother had known all along. He said nothing. "Who is he?" I was compelled to leave. Matt paused again. "Jason, do not do anything dumb." "Who is he?" Another prolonged delay. "And then his name is Eric." I held the phone so firmly that I believed it would break. "Eric who?" Matt sighed. "Eric Williams." The first felt the name like a slap in the face, because I knew it. I was pretty familiar with it. Rachel's employer was Eric Williams, whom she had been working late with. The person who had authorized all of those mystery business excursions. The one who, now that I think about it, I've always glanced at my wife a little too long whenever we ran into him at company gatherings. My heartbeat sounded in my ears. Rachel wasn't simply cheating on me. She was ripping off the guy who signed her paychecks. And then everything clicked. The arrogance, the assurance, the certainty that she could get away with it. Because this wasn't just about an affair. She was leaving me for him. She wasn't terrified about the consequences. Because, in her mind, there were none. She had a new life ahead of her, a safety net. She had meticulously prepared every last detail, except one item, me, because if she believed I was going to let this go, she was mistaken. She had seriously underestimated me, that I wouldn't be reckless. That is exactly what she wanted. That is what they wanted. If I lost control and lashed out, it would just make it easier for them to portray me as the bitter, insane ex-husband who couldn't handle rejection. Now I was going to be wise. I turned around and drove home, my mind racing, putting everything together. Rachel had meticulously planned every aspect, but she had underestimated me. She believed I was weak. That was her first mistake. When I came back inside, she was still in bed, sound asleep. As if she hadn't just destroyed our entire marriage a few hours ago, I stood at the doorway. She appeared tranquil and rested, as if she had already moved on. Not yet. I silently backed out of the room, went straight to the office, opened my laptop, and began digging. Rachel wasn't just going to leave me. She had planned to get me. I found the emails first. A thread in which she and Eric talk finances, assets, and my assets. He won't have time to react after I file. He's overly emotional. He won't think clearly. By the time he knows what's going on, I'll have everything I need. Rachel, Jason is not an idiot. Believe me, he will not see it coming. Every muscle in my body seized up. She was correct about one thing. I didn't see it coming. But now I see everything. The bank statements revealed transfers, indicating that money was moved out of our joint account, slowly and carefully, thousands at one time, always just low enough to avoid alerts. A second account under her name, only a credit card. I wasn't simply being cheated on. I was getting robbed. The final nail in the coffin. A draft email to her lawyer that was not sent. I am ready to file. I'll notify him this week if he becomes hostile. I have documentation to back up my allegation. Evidence? I checked her cloud storage. She had been filming me footage of arguments that were meticulously manipulated to make me appear awful. Emails she created from my account to herself, portraying me as paranoid and unstable. Fake receipts for purchases I never made, as if I had spent wildly. It was a setup. The whole event was a setup, and she was going to make sure I left with nothing. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark, my fingers aching from gripping the desk edge so firmly. This was not simply betrayal. This was wartime. And she had no idea I had just caught up and didn't barge into the bedroom. I didn't get her up and put the proof in her face. It would have been emotional, stupid. She expected exactly this reaction. Instead, I sat in the office silently, still pondering. Rachel thought she'd already won. This was her vulnerability. She felt I was slow and blind, too broken to fight back. She had no idea what was coming. By the time she woke up, I was in the kitchen, making coffee as usual. She strolled in, wearing one of my shirts, as if she hadn't already demolished me hours before, and stretched, yawning. "You're awake early." I smiled at her as I turned around with my mug. Smiled. Couldn't sleep. She did not even blink. There is no guilt. Without hesitation, she simply strolled over, grabbed her own cup, and sipped. "You should try. Stress is not good for you." I nearly laughed. The arrogance. I observed her every action. She had no idea I knew. She pondered yesterday night. Was I driving off to sulk, nurse my wounds, or drink myself into a miserable, lonely haze? I let her believe that for the following 2 days, I played my role flawlessly. I let her think I was weak. I let her to feel I was crumbling. She spent more time texting and venturing outside to answer work calls at night. She scarcely glanced at me. She assumed she had complete control, and that I was simply waiting for her to drop the bomb. First, I dropped mine. On the 3rd day, I took the afternoon off work to meet with a lawyer. By the 4th day, I had secured our joint accounts, identified her unauthorized transfers, and obtained every financial record I could discover. By the 5th day, I'd put security cameras around the house. She didn't notice. She never paid attention to the minor details. Then, on the 6th day, I texted her when she was gone. "We need to talk. Come home." She took her time. Nearly 2 hours. When she eventually entered, she exuded the same smug confidence, as if she was ready to do me a favor by dissolving our marriage. She placed her luggage down, arms crossed. "Jason, please take a seat." She frowned. My tone caught them off surprise. Good. I was seated at the dining table, laptop open, and heaps of paper nicely placed. Calm, controlled, unshakable. She paused. I could see wheels working in her head. This was not the script she had planned. I motioned to the chair across from me. "Sit." For the first time in years. Rachel appeared uncertain. She said. I clicked the laptop. The screen flashed up, displaying one of her recorded arguments, the edited footage she intended to use against me. Her face turned pallid. I clicked again. Emails, bank statements, and transaction records. The second account. A private credit card. The final touch. Send a copy of the draft email to her lawyer. Silence. Thick. Oppressive. I leaned forward and folded my hands. "Now, Rachel." I said it calmly and deliberately. "Let's speak about how this will actually go." She stared at the screen with her mouth slightly open, and her fingers twitching on the table, as if she wanted to grab the laptop and erase everything. Too late. I noticed the emotions flash across her face. Shock. Realization. Then comes rage. Where did you obtain it? She inquired, her voice tense. I smiled. Slow and chilly. That is not the question you should ask. She clenched her jaw and curled her palms into fists. This was not the version of me she had anticipated. She was prepared for the broken man, the one who would beg, cry, and scream, the man she had meticulously staged to appear weak and desperate. She was unprepared for this. Do you believe this changes anything? She sneered, but I could see a little tremble in her voice. So what? Jason, you dug through my belongings. I found several messages, a few financial transactions. It is nothing. You have no case. I chuckled. Rachel. I leaned back in my chair and stretched out as if I had all the time in the world. Do you honestly believe I'd be sitting here if this was all I had? She swallowed. You're not telling the truth. I didn't respond. Rachel was pacing, whispering, and talking to Eric on the phone, while I opened a new tab with footage from the security cameras I'd put in our bedroom. No, he knows nothing. He is pathetic. Eric. He is still moping around, waiting for me to speak the words. He has no idea. I am already moving money. No, absolutely not. I've been careful. By the time he realizes it, I'll be long gone. I noticed her body stiffen as she glanced at the TV. Her breath caught. She realized she couldn't get out of this by justifying it. You. Did you record me? She spoke barely above a whisper. Of course I did. I spoke smoothly. Rachel, were you planning to frame me? What? You assumed I wouldn't fight back? She sat back in her chair and exhaled hard through her nostrils. You have no rights. I have every right. My voice sliced through hers like a knife. You stole from me. You lied, cheated, and intended to harm me. So you want to talk about rights? She glared at me, and I could see it now. That breach in her armor could be the first sign of dread. I selected the last document on the screen, a restraining order, pre-filled and ready to submit based on her own fabricated reports of my aggressiveness, but now turned against her with genuine evidence of manipulation and fraud. Her face had lost its color. I tapped the paper stack in front of me. Here's what will happen, Rachel. You are going to leave today. You're not accepting any money from me. You are about to sign this document. I slipped another paper across the table, a settlement waiver, leaving her with nothing. Or I file everything. I motioned to the laptop. Trust me, dear. When your dear Eric discovers what's in here, he'll treat you like trash. Her eyes expanded briefly. That was it. That's when she realized she'd lost Jason. Her voice became lower, with a hint of desperation coming in. Let's simply talk about it. I smiled. I'd waited for this moment. There's nothing left to discuss. I said, get out. Rachel just sat down for the first time since this nightmare began. She did not have a comeback. No pompous remarks, no phony pity, and no twisted little machinations. Just silence. It was wonderful. I leaned forward and rested my elbows on the table. You believe you'd cornered me. I stated it slowly and deliberately, allowing each syllable to sink in. I thought I'd just sit back and let you take everything out from under me. But here's the deal, Rachel. I smiled. And this time, it was not forced. It was real. I am not the fool you mistook me for. Her respiration had quickened. I could see it, her brain scrambling and calculating. Even now, when she was arrested, she was looking for a way out. But there wasn't one. Not this time. I moved the waiver towards her again, lightly tapping it. You sign this, and then walk away with nothing. There's no money, no assets, and no legal leverage. But at least you can go away. She gazed at me, her eyes filled with hate. You cannot force me, I chuckled. You're correct, I cannot. I motioned toward the laptop. But I can ensure that everyone recognizes you for who you truly are. Your boss, friends, and family. I cocked my head. Tell me, do you think Eric will stick around after he realizes you're as harsh with him as you were with me? Her lips parted slightly. I had hit a nerve. Good. I stood up, slow and steady, towering over her. Or I proceeded. You can fight me. Attempt to drag this through court. Attempt to play the victim. Try to tell tiny lies. I shrugged. But then, Rachel, I bury you. A dense, oppressive quiet fell between us. She realized she'd lost. I saw her jaw clench. Her nostrils flared. For a second, I thought she'd scream or erupt, but instead, she did something worse. She smiled, but not with the confidence and smugness that she had before displayed. This was uglier. Do you think this is over? She mumbled and tapped her nails on the table. Do you honestly think you've won? I met her eyes without blinking. I don't think I know, Rachel. A long breath and a moment of pause. Then she grabbed the pen and signed. Just like that. When she finished, she pushed the paper toward me. Her hands shook slightly. You're going to regret this, she whispered. I took up the document, looked at her signature, and smiled. No, Rachel, you will. She stood abruptly, knocking her chair back with no further words. She stormed out of the room, her steps fast and furious. I exhaled. My entire body instantly became light. It was over. I assumed it was because Rachel hadn't finished yet. Rachel went into the bedroom, and I remained at the table, staring at the signed waiver. I should have felt victorious. I should have been relieved. But something isn't looking at me. I heard a whisper in the back of my mind. She signed too easily. Rachel was a fighter, a manipulator. She didn't simply fold. She did not lose. Not like this. Something was coming, and it did not take long. About 15 minutes later, I heard her closet door slam. The rustle of garments, the sharp zipper on a suitcase. She was indeed leaving. I stood up slowly, listening as she stomped back into the living room, carrying a bag with her. When she noticed me, her face twisted into a sneer. Move! She snapped at me, as if I were in her way. I did not. Where are you going? She rolled her eyes. So, where do you stand? Eric? Of course. I nearly laughed. This was her magnificent scheme. She assumed she'd just waltz out of here and into his arms, that he would greet her with wide arms. I sent him everything, but she still didn't grasp it. I stood aside, gesturing toward the door. Be my guest. Rachel narrowed her gaze. She was waiting for me to break and beg. She expected me to crumble at the last second if I chased after her. I would tell her I still loved her, but I was simply watching. And that's when she snapped. You know what? She spat, grasping the handle of her luggage so fiercely that her knuckles turned white. Jason, you were never good enough for me. Never. You are boring, predictable, weak. I smiled. Why did you have to cheat instead of simply leaving? Her face contorted with wrath. Eric is tenfold the man you will ever be. I chuckled while resting against the wall. I hope you still think so once he sees what I sent him. Rachel froze. What? She whispered. I shrugged and pulled out my phone. Oh, didn't I explain that Eric received the emails, bank statements, and recordings? I'm guessing he is reading them right now. I checked the time. Yeah, Rachel's breathing has become irregular. You are lying. I smiled. She realized I wasn't. Then her phone rang. I watched her hesitate and stare at the screen as if it were a loaded rifle. Eric. Her fingers trembled as she replied, Hello, baby. I didn't hear what he said, but I noticed how her face collapsed. First comes perplexity, then astonishment, and finally complete panic. No, Eric, listen, I'll explain. Silence. Her mouth opened, closed. She gulped hard. Eric, the call has ended. Rachel just stood there, staring at her phone and at nothing. And then, as if a switch had been flipped, she lunged at me, enraged. You son of a bitch! I took a step back and watched as she lost it, screaming, cursing, hands shaky. This was it. She realized she'd played her game too well, lied too much, and controlled too much. And suddenly she possessed nothing. I let her scream, thrash, and have her miserable tantrum. When she eventually ran out of breath, I leaned in close and murmured, Get out of my house. She stared at me with crazy eyes and a heaving chest, as if she had no other alternative. She grabbed her suitcase, leaving the door slammed behind her. Rachel vanished suddenly. Or so I thought. For the first time in years, the house was strangely silent. I stood in my own house and felt like I could breathe. No strain. What? No games? No, Rachel. I should have been relieved. Instead, I felt something different. Anticipation. Rachel wasn't the sort to admit defeat. And I was correct. It took exactly 43 minutes for me to hear the tires screech outside, the car door slamming, and the fast, angry stomp of heels on pavement. Then bam, bang, bang, she was back. I smirked. Predictable. I did not rush to open the door. Instead, I took my time sipping my coffee and made her wait. Allow her to simmer in her own failure. When I eventually opened the door, she was furious. Her hair was wild, her face contorted with wrath, and her fists clenched at her sides. "You've ruined my life," she yelled. I leaned against the doorframe and raised an eyebrow. "Did I?" Her hands shook. Eric kicked me out. I faked astonishment. "Not kidding. Do you think this is funny?" she snarled. "Do you think you've won?" I tilted my head. "I don't think I know, Rachel." Her nostrils flared. "You set me up." I laughed. Really laughed. "You set yourself up. I'll just let you dig your own grave." Her eyes went past me and into the home. "Let me in." I shake my head. Not a chance. Her breathing became irregular. "Where should I go, Jason?" I crossed my arms. "Not my problem." Her expression was contorted and desperate. "Now. Jason, come on. This is something we can fix." I blinked before grinning slowly and deliberately. "You still don't understand it, do you?" I stepped forward, towering over her, and watched as her confidence crumbled. "I do not want to fix anything. I want you to depart." Her lips twitched. "Please," she whispered. I shake my head. "Not this time, Rachel." Then, before she could say anything else, I shut the door in her face. I waited there, listening to the silence, until I heard her footsteps retreat. The automobile door opened and banged. The engine screamed into life, and she was gone for good. I exhaled and ran a hand over my hair. My hands didn't shake anymore. My heart was not thumping. Rachel was no longer alive, only a spirit. For the first time in a very long time, I smiled. Thank you for listening to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Also, leave a comment below to share your thoughts on what happened. Take care.